Greetings fellow captains and welcome back to another episode of World of Warships with the Hivehound. And today, a lot of people have mentioned this and a lot of people have been asking for them. And yes, it's true. I first started off and it was my historic information about ships that people, really started to pique people's interests besides the gameplay. And with me trying really hard to get content out regular, every day, to be honest with you, I think that the quality is still good. I've been trying to constantly improve my video editing and stuff. I think I have sort of lacked in the content side of it, so I am actively making a bit more of an effort to provide some historical content. I'm going to try and do one once a week as time allows. We're going to start this off with the USS Wichita, which is the new campaign ship from the Lone Wolf campaign that has been released with the new update. So the USS Wichita, or CA-45, was a unique, one-of-a-kind heavy cruiser for the United States built in the 1930s. It was the last cruiser designed to meet the limitations of the London Naval Treaty, and she was intended to be a New Orleans class heavy cruiser, in accordance with the maximum main armament of 3 triple 8-inch or 203mm gun turrets. These instead were placed on an improved hull derived from the Brooklyn class light cruiser. We have one of those in the game already. That is the USS Boise, but significantly increased the armouring, and this design would go on to form the basis for the later heavy cruisers in the Baltimore class. The ship was authorised under the 1929 Cruiser Act and laid down in the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard in October of 1935, and launched almost 2 years later in November of 1937, and then was fully commissioned into the US Navy on February of 1939. Following her commissioning, the Wichita was assigned to neutral patrols in the Atlantic, and after the United States entered World War II, the ship saw heavy service throughout the entire conflict. She was first assigned to convoy escort duties in the Murmansk Run in early 1942, and supported amphibious landings in Operation Torch. She took part in the naval battle of Casablanca, and she also got into a bit of a scrap with the Jean Bart in 1943 as well. And that was all before she was transferred to the Pacific Theatre. So let's dive into the design. So in the early 1930s, the Secretary of the Navy, Curtis D. Wilbur, pushed for a new construction program for light and heavy cruisers. Wilbur succeeded in passing the Cruisers Act in 1929 and authorised several new ships. 5 heavy cruisers, the last of which being the Wichita, were ordered between 1931 and 1934. Wichita was the last cruiser ever produced under the London Naval Treaty terms, which limited the US to 18 heavy cruisers with a maximum standard displacement of 10,000 long tons. She was originally intended to be built on the design of the New Orleans class, but the design was, they weren't happy with how the hull was performing. So instead, as mentioned, they based it off the Brooklyn class light cruiser, but was significantly modified to give her a higher freeboard, so better stability, which was needed because of the larger caliber guns, increased cruising radius, a secondary battery of 8 5-inch guns, identical in the number to the light cruisers, but arranged to give better fields of fire. So whereas the light cruisers had all their guns on either side of the ship, the secondary batteries, the word salad, the Wichita had 2 guns on either side, and then one at the front of the fore and one at the aft, the rear of the ship. So at any one given time they could fire 5 guns either side, giving her a bit of an advantage in the secondary battery placement to the light cruiser variants. General characteristics: the Wichita was 600 feet long at the waterline. She had a beam of 61 feet 9 inches or 18.82 meters and a draft of 23 foot. She displaced a little over the limit of the naval treaty at 10,589 long tons and had a standard displacement of 13,000 long tons when fully loaded for combat. She had a crew of she had a crew of 929, including officers and enlisted seamen, and was equipped with 4 seaplanes, a pair of aircraft catapults, and a crane for handling the aircraft, which were mounted on the stern. The Wichita was powered by 4 Parsons steam turbine and 8 Babcock and Wilcock oil-fired water tube boilers, giving her a total shaft horsepower of 75,000 kilowatts. So that would give her a top speed of 33 knots. The hull was protected at the waterline with an armour belt composed of the new Class A armour, which was 6.5 inches or 160 millimeters thick in the midships. This was reduced to 4 inches at either end, and the belt was backed by 16 millimeters or 0.63 of an inch of special treatment steel. The Class A steel was significantly more effective than the Class B armour used on the earlier cruisers. So an 8-inch gun had to get within 9 kilometers to penetrate the armour belt, whereas on the previous Class B armour, which didn't have the special treated steel and was also thinner, could be penetrated from 15 kilometers. The Wichita also had thicker deck armour of 57 millimeters, which made it immune to 8-inch shell fire within 20 kilometers. The conning tower was also quite heavily armoured with 6-inch thick sides and a 2.5-inch thick roof. The main turrets had 8-inch thick faces and 3.75 thick sides, making them particularly well armoured. The turrets were mounted in armoured barbette protection of 7 inches of armour plating as well. So this is quite a tanky ship. So as for the Wichita's main armament, it comes with main battery of 9 8-inch 55 caliber Mark 12 guns mounted in 3 triple turrets. They fired the 335 pound projectile with a muzzle velocity of 760 meters per second, and for all intents and purposes the guns, although not accurately, but its maximum theoretical range was 27.5 kilometers, and the rate of fire was 1 shot every 15 seconds. So a bit slower than some of the 2 or 3 millimeter guns that we see in the game currently. I wonder how, obviously I've recorded this previously, so we'll see how Wargaming handled that. The guns could accurately engage targets at a range of 16.6 kilometers, and the Wichita was the first cruiser in the US Navy to be equipped with the new 5-inch 38 caliber guns that were used for the secondary batteries. So on to the service history. It had a poor start to life, in all fairness. The Wichita suffered several minor problems within the first couple of years of service, which required heading back to the New York dockyard for multiple repairs. One including, well, when she was on patrol in training in a patrol on the Denmark Straits, a powerful storm on the 15th of January with wind speeds of 150 kilometers an hour and gusts of up to 190 hit Iceland. The Wichita was damaged in the storm, which included colliding with the freighter, the West Nihon, the British trawler, Eber Wykes, and she also ran aground. The following day, the ship's crew evaluated her condition. She suffered minor damage from the collision, including some leaks and some damage to the hull from grounding. Temporary repairs were effected in Iceland, which allowed the Wichita to return to New York for further repairs. She spent a couple of days in dock when she arrived on the 9th of February and left port for manoeuvres off Maine on the 26th of March. On the 26th of March, it was assigned to Task Force 93, which departed the United States to reinforce the British home fleet based in Scapa Flow. Task Force 39 was commanded by Rear Admiral John W. Wilcox Jr. And included the Wasp, the cruiser Wasp, the battleship Washington, the cruiser Tuscaloosa, and 8 destroyers. While en route, Wilcox was swept overboard in heavy seas and lost. Then Rear Admiral Robert C. Giffen, who flew his flag on the Wichita, took command of the task force. After arriving at Scapa Flow, the Wichita and the other American ships spent several weeks training with their British counterparts, and on the 28th of April, Wichita departed for a first major operation with the British, where she was assigned to the Allied escort of Arctic Convoy QP-11 and PQ-15. The American component, organised as Task Force 99, comprised of Washington, Wichita, Tuscaloosa and the 4 destroyers, and the British assigned the carrier Victorious, the battleship King George V, along with an escort of a light cruiser and 5 destroyers. After successfully escorting the convoys, the Wichita returned to Havenfjord, which is in Denmark, and arrived there on the 6th of May. Now, I could go on about the Atlantic Theatre. It didn't really do much else. There was mainly escort duties, and there was, obviously, she took part in Operation Torch, where the Massachusetts attacked the Jean Bart, and the Wichita also engaged in that battle. The Wichita was hit by a 7.5-inch shell fired from a shore battery from El Bank, and the shell penetrated her deck and exploded below, which sent her back home for further repairs in New York. But after that, shortly after the repairs were completed, Wichita was transferred to the Pacific Theatre, where she was assigned to Task Force 18, commanded by Rear Admiral Giffen again, and was tasked with operations in Guadalcanal. She was joined by the heavy cruisers Louisville, Chicago, the light cruisers Monopia, Cleveland, and Columbia, in addition to the carriers Shengo and Swanee. The 8 destroyers, also an additional 8 destroyers, were present to the task group. On the night of the 29th of January 1943, the task force was steaming off Renau Island, and they were wary of the threat of Japanese submarines, which Allies intelligence indicated were likely to be in the area. So Giffen arranged his cruisers and destroyers for anti-submarine defence, not expecting an air attack, and the cruisers were assigned into 2 columns spaced just over 2 kilometers apart. Wichita, Chicago and Louisville, in that order. on the starboard, and the Monopia, Cleveland and Columbia were to the port. The 6 destroyers were in semicircles, another 3 kilometers ahead of the cruiser column. That evening, the ships came under attack from Japanese torpedo bombers in the ensuing Battle of Reynolds Island. The Chicago was hit by several torpedoes and sunk. The Wichita was hit by 1 torpedo, which luckily failed to explode. The Wichita then steamed to Effield in the New Hebrides for a training period. Then she was departed on the 7th of April, bound for Pearl Harbor, arriving just a week later. After arriving at Pearl Harbor, she steamed off to Alaska, again flying Griffin's flag, to join Task Group 52. In early May, Wichita was assigned to the Amphibious Task Force, which was charged with liberating the Atoll Islands from Japanese control. She served as the flagship for the Northern Covering Force, along with the cruiser Louisville and San Francisco, with 4 accompanying destroyers. The Wichita, 3 other cruisers, 4 destroyers bombarded the Japanese position on the island of Kiska. The bombardment convinced the Japanese that the Americans intended to invade the island in the near future and therefore planned to evacuate. Further then, on the 19th of July, a powerful American fleet joined, including the battleships New Mexico, Idaho and Mississippi, to conduct another attack on Kiska 3 days later. 5 days later, after this, malfunctioning radar equipment, the Wichita was equipped with newfangled radar technology, which originally thought they were Phantoms. The Wichita and 2 battleships expended over 1,000 rounds of ammunition from their main battery on an MTC. It turns out that what they had actually detected, which probably goes to show how good the radar system was, were schools of petrels, which are these small black seafaring birds. So yeah, what weren't actually Phantoms, which they believed was later discovered to be birds. The Wichita landed a seaplane and the same day the Japanese successfully evacuated the island, which led to the invasion by the American troops. And the morning after the assumed engagement, Wichita launched a seaplane to do some reconnaissance in the area, but found no evidence of the Japanese forces at all. The Wichita also participated in exercises off Hawaii for the remainder of the year, and then she departed to take part in the invasion of Marshall Island. She was assigned to Task Group 58 under the command of Rear Admiral Frederick C. Sherman, and the task force included the fleet carrier Bunker Hill, the light carrier Cowpens and Monterey, the fast battleship North Carolina, Massachusetts, the Alabama, the South Dakota, and several destroyers. So quite a substantial force. The Wichita's role was to provide anti-air support for the carriers while they conducted strikes on, I'm going to butcher these, Carwigeen and Eltawat on the 29th and 31st of January. By the 4th of February, the Wichita arrived in Majero, where she was transferred to Task Group 58.2, and the force departed Majero on the 12th of February to conduct Operation Hailstone, a major airstrike on the Japanese base at Troost 4 days later. As you can see, when we're still not done with the Pacific Theater, the Wichita really did see significant service. We're just going to skip and gloss over these a bit. So the Wichita bombed gun positions in Guam, the Marolina, Islands. It also took part in the Battle of the Philippine Seas, where she contributed with anti-aircraft screening. She did actually shoot a Japanese Kamikaze Zero plane, which she shot down, and it just skipped and bounced off the hull, bounced off the deck, sorry, without causing any damage. She was later then also conducted numerous operations in the Philippines, including supports on raids on Okinawa, raids on Epernay and Luzon. She was also attacked and badly damaged the cruisers. Hang on, bear with me a second. The Japanese bombs attacked her fleet and badly damaged the cruisers Canberra and Folsom. She was then present in the Battle of the Leyte Gulf. Also, she entered she was also taking part. She was part of Task Force 54, which took part in the invasion of Okinawa, and she covered minesweeping duties there. Basically, this is just getting too long now. We're on 20 minutes just covering the Wichita. She was extensively used, and probably the most used cruiser in the American fleet during World War II. Although I'm probably wrong, but someone will let me know. But the Wichita was awarded 13 battle stars for her service during World War II. So we'll skip over to the end of her life. Basically, because of the Washington Naval Treaty, there wasn't really a place for the Wichita, where the Baltimore class superseding her. There were originally plans to transfer her into a missile cruiser, but that was scrapped, the Boston and Canberra were chosen to be converted to missile cruisers instead. So on the 1st of March 1959, the ship was stricken from the Naval Vessel Register and sold on the 14th of August to Union Minerals and the Allied Corps for dismantling, and essentially sold for scrap. So quite a long video. Hopefully we've got some. I'm recording this prior because it was getting on my nerves that I hadn't done a history video in a while. So I'm hoping we've got some Wichita gameplay footage in the background. I do hope you enjoyed this look into the history of a very hard-working cruiser from the American Navy. And well, until next time, take care.